You're going to love the new retirement home. They have knitting classes. Christine's smile was as fake as her eyelash extensions, a brittle, painted-on thing that didn't reach her cold eyes. My eldest son, Robert, nodded beside her like an obedient puppy, while my youngest, David, stared intently at his wine glass, mentally counting the money they'd make from selling my properties. I saw it all, and I just smiled. Yes, I said, my voice a placid surface on a deep, churning lake. That sounds like a wonderful idea. But inside, something shattered for good. They had chosen the most elegant restaurant in Chicago for this charade, a place with white linen tablecloths and crystal glasses that reflected the golden evening light. The air smelled of expensive seafood and betrayal. Everything was perfect for an emotional execution, all calculated to look like a celebration when it was really my funeral, and I was still alive. Mom, we know you've been a little confused lately, Robert continued, his voice thick with a concern he didn't feel. He was wearing a gray suit I had bought him for his college graduation. Now he was using it to bury me, confused. That word stabbed me like a dagger. For the past few months, I had faked a few memory lapses, deliberately asked the same question twice, just to test their patience, their love. I wanted to see if my children, the 2 boys and 1 girl I had raised from nothing, would take care of me when I truly needed them. The answer was sitting right in front of me, wearing the very emerald green dress I had gifted her for her birthday. Dr. Jenkins says it would be for the best, David lied, finally looking up but avoiding my gaze. A controlled environment, professional care, activities designed especially for people your age. People my age. As if turning 72 had made me a different species, something that no longer deserved respect or dignity. As if a lifetime of building a real estate empire from scratch meant nothing. And the knitting classes are really therapeutic, Christine added, touching my hands with fingers that burned with falsehood. You can make tablecloths, scarves, useful things. Useful things. While they were carving up my properties like vultures over a fresh kill, I would be making tablecloths in a room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. When would the move be? I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. Tomorrow, Robert answered far too quickly. We've already made all the arrangements. You just need to sign a few papers. My heart hammered against my ribs. And what will happen to my properties? The silence that followed was so thick I could taste it. They looked at each other, that quick, guilty flicker between thieves caught in the act. Christine cleared her throat. David fiddled with his napkin until it nearly tore. Don't you worry about that, Mom, David finally said, the lie smooth on his tongue. We'll take care of everything. It's too much responsibility for you right now. Too much responsibility. The same properties I had bought, renovated, and managed for 40 years were suddenly too much for me. The same investments I had grown from an initial $5,000 to the $1.5 million they knew about suddenly required younger, sharper minds. That night, back at my house, which they now treated as a holding cell, I pretended to take the sleeping pills Christine had so thoughtfully provided. This will help you rest, Mom. Big day tomorrow. I palmed them, spat them into a napkin when she wasn't looking. I needed to be wide awake for what was coming. At 11 p.m., I heard their hushed, excited voices in my kitchen. They thought I was sound asleep, sedated and helpless. A fatal mistake. The beach house is worth at least $300,000, Robert whispered, the sound of shuffling papers echoing faintly down the hall. They were at my oak dining table, the very table where I had signed my first real estate contract 40 years ago. And the downtown condo, another $200,000, David added, not to mention the investments in the bank. We have to act fast, Christine murmured, the clink of glasses telling me she was pouring champagne, the bottle I had been saving for a special occasion. Before she realizes what's happening. David laughed, that cruel, sharp laugh he had developed after marrying his equally ambitious wife. Realizes? Are you kidding? She asked me what time it was 3 times yesterday. A lie. I had feigned that confusion to test them, to see how much of my own blood had turned to poison. The answer burned in my gut like acid. Look at this, Christine said, and I heard the rustle of a specific paper I knew all too well, my will. Once she's in the home, we can argue mental incompetence. Our lawyer is already prepped. $400,000 for the main house, Robert calculated, scribbling numbers in a notebook. $300,000 for the beach house, $200,000 for the condo, and the investments add up to another $600,000. Almost $1.5 million in total. $1.5 million. The fruit of a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and smart decisions, calculated down to the last cent, while I was supposedly sedated in my own bed. And the best part, David added, his voice oozing with smug satisfaction that I could hear even from my bedroom, is that she'll never know what all of this is really worth. She thinks it's just a few properties. They completely underestimated me. They thought I was a confused old woman who didn't understand numbers or business. They didn't know that every morning I reviewed my investments online, that I knew the exact market value of each property, that I had plans they couldn't even begin to imagine. At 5 a.m., while they slept off their drunken betrayal, I got dressed in my best black pantsuit. I moved silently, a ghost in my own home. I took only the essentials, my passport, the jewelry I had hidden in a secret box beneath a loose floorboard, and the key to a safe deposit box in a bank in another city. In that box were the documents that would change everything. The taxi I had pre-booked arrived on time. The driver helped me with my small suitcase and asked no questions. At the airport, I bought a one-way ticket to a coastal city in Florida, a city where I owned a property they knew nothing about. During the flight, I closed my eyes and remembered my late husband Richard's words. Eleanor, never fully trust anyone, not even your own children. Blood can be corrupted, but dignity is eternal. He was right, and I was about to show them that a 72-year-old woman could be more dangerous than any enemy they had ever imagined. If you're on the edge of your seat and want to see what happens when I land, hit that like button. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to Aunt Millie's Tales so you don't miss a moment of this story. The plane landed in a city I hadn't visited in 30 years, Seabrook Shores, Florida. It was a name my children had never heard me speak, because some stories, some places, are too precious to share with those who don't deserve them. The salt air hit my face like a slap of memory. This was where it had all begun. This was where, as a young secretary, I had used my entire life savings, $5,000 that seemed like a fortune back then, to buy my very first property. $5,000 that had grown into the empire my children now wanted to steal from me. The taxi drove me through streets I recognized despite the passage of time. The palm trees were taller, their fronds whispering secrets to the wind. "Is this the right address, ma'am?" the driver asked, stopping in front of a small yellow house with green wooden shutters. "Looks like no one's lived here for a while." I smiled for the first time in days. It's perfect. The house seemed to be sleeping, waiting for my return. It was small, humble compared to the properties my children knew, but it had something none of the others possessed. A true history. It was my secret refuge, my escape plan, kept quiet for decades. I took the keys from my purse, my hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from emotion. The door opened with a familiar creak, like a welcoming sigh. The inside smelled of old wood and sea salt. The furniture was draped in white sheets, creating ghostly figures in the dim light. I walked slowly through the rooms, removing the covers one by one, revealing treasures I had left there like seeds waiting for the right moment to sprout. In the kitchen, I found the first surprise. On the table was a note written in a shaky but familiar hand. Mrs. Vance, I've been waiting for you all these years. Maria. My heart skipped a beat. Maria Rodriguez had been my housekeeper for 15 years, until Robert and Christine decided we no longer needed her. It's an unnecessary expense, Mom, they had said. We can help you with the house. Another lie. They just wanted to control every aspect of my life, including who could or couldn't be near me. I heard footsteps on the front porch. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Mariah, 30 years older, her hair completely white, her face a beautiful map of a life well lived, but with the same warm, loyal eyes I remembered. I knew you'd come, she said simply, as if only days had passed instead of decades. When I heard what your children were planning, I knew you'd find a way to get here. How did you know? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Maria smiled sadly. Christine called me a month ago. She wanted information about your properties, about any bank accounts you might have hidden. I told her I didn't know anything, of course. So Christine had been digging. It wasn't enough to steal what they knew about. They wanted to make sure there were no hidden treasures. The irony was delicious. They had called the one person who truly knew all my secrets, and she had protected me without hesitation. But I did know, Maria continued, approaching me with slow, steady steps. I knew about this house. I knew about the documents you kept here. I knew about your plans, and I've been taking care of everything, waiting for this day. My eyes filled with tears I couldn't hold back. For the first time in months, someone was looking at me like a whole person, not as an obstacle or a source of money. The documents are safe, Maria whispered, taking my hands in hers. I checked on them every month. I made sure they didn't deteriorate. Your plan is still intact. My plan. I had started designing it 20 years ago when I first realized my children saw my properties as their guaranteed inheritance, not as the result of my hard work. I had created a protective web, a financial and legal fortress so complex that not even the best lawyer could easily unravel it. Where are they? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Maria led me to a back room I didn't remember. It had been converted into a small, secure office with metal filing cabinets and a small safe embedded in the wall. The combination is still the same, she said, pointing to the safe. Your husband's birthday. My dear Richard, he had passed away 10 years ago, but his wisdom continued to protect me. Never put all your eggs in one basket, Eleanor, he used to say, and never let anyone else control your destiny, not even your children. I opened the safe with hands that no longer trembled. Inside were all the documents I had hidden for decades. Deeds to properties my children didn't know existed, statements for investments in international banks, a completely different will from the one they had photographed and plotted over. But the most important thing was a thick folder marked with the initials H.C. Hope Center. Do you remember your dream? Maria asked, watching me as I reverently touched the folder. You wanted to create a place where older women could live with dignity, where they wouldn't be treated like burdens. Of course I remembered. It had been my secret obsession for years. A home for women like me, women who had been abandoned by their families, betrayed by their children, or simply forgotten by a society that discards anyone who no longer produces money. Everything is ready, Maria continued, her voice filled with pride. The permits, the blueprints, the funds set aside specifically for this project. It just needed you to come back and activate it. Tears streamed down my cheeks uncontrollably. For months I had felt my life was falling apart. that I had lost all purpose. But here, in this small, secret room, was the proof that I had always had a bigger plan, a mission that transcended my children's petty greed. "Is there anything else?" I asked, wiping my eyes. Maria pulled a cell phone from her purse. "Mr. Harrison has been waiting for your call." Mr. Harrison, my trusted lawyer, the only professional who knew the full extent of my plans. I had hired him in secret 5 years ago, paying him with funds from accounts my children would never discover. "Is he still reliable?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "More than ever," Maria said with a grim smile. "His own son tried to have him declared incompetent last year. He understands exactly what's at stake." I took the phone with renewed determination. It was time to begin the next phase of my plan, the phase that would turn my apparent defeat into the sweetest victory of my life. I dialed the number I had memorized years ago. Mr. Harrison answered on the second ring. "Eleanor," his voice was relieved and excited. "I knew you'd call today. Are you ready to begin?" I looked out the window at the endless ocean. "More than ready, Mr. Harrison. It's time to remind my children who I really am." "Everything is set for tomorrow," Mr. Harrison said over the phone, his voice filled with a professional satisfaction I could feel through the line. "Your children have called a family meeting for 10 a.m. at your house. They think they're going to sign the papers to transfer your assets." I smiled as I watched the waves crash against the rocks, a fury I understood perfectly. "Who will be there?" "Robert, David, Christine, and they've also invited your older brother Thomas. Apparently, they want family witnesses to make everything look legal and transparent." Mr. Harrison chuckled ironically. "The lawyer they hired will also be there, a Mr. Davis, who has a reputation for being, let's say, ethically flexible. Thomas, my older brother, who had always envied my success in business. Of course he would be there, a vulture smelling a carcass." "And our plan?" I asked. "Perfect. I'll arrive at 10:30, when they're all gathered and feeling confident. I have all the original documents, the recordings we made last year, and the special surprise we prepared." The special surprise? A video I had recorded 2 years ago, when I first sensed this day might come. In it, I explained my reasons in detail, my true plans, and revealed secrets about my children that they thought were buried forever. "Maria will be with me," I added, looking at my faithful friend, who was making coffee in the kitchen with the ease of someone who had never left. "She has information that will be very enlightening." "Excellent. The more credible witnesses we have, the better. Are you sure you want to do this, Eleanor? Once we start, there's no turning back." I thought of Christine's fake smile, Robert's empty promises, David's greedy eyes. I thought of the years I had sacrificed to build a future for children who only saw my death as a business opportunity. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, Maria and I stayed up late. She told me something that made my blood run cold. 3 months ago, Christine had visited her, not just asking about properties, but about my mental health, asking if I'd shown any signs of dementia or confusion. Maria, my loyal friend, had told her I was the sharpest woman she knew. But there was more. Maria went to a closet and brought out a small box. "I found this in the trash at your house the day they fired me." She opened it, and my heart stopped. Inside were all the letters my husband Richard had written to me while we were dating. Love letters I had treasured for 50 years, letters that had mysteriously disappeared from my room last month. "They threw them away," Maria whispered, "as if they were garbage." My own children had discarded the most precious pieces of my past, the written proof of a love they were incapable of understanding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I reread every one of Richard's letters. In one of his last, he had written, Eleanor, you are stronger than you think. If anyone ever tries to take your worth from you, you fight. Fight with all the fury of a woman who knows her worth. For months, I had allowed my children to make me feel useless, confused, incapable. But Richard was right. My worth didn't depend on their love or respect. It depended on me. At 8 a.m., Mr. Harrison called to confirm the final details. "Your children are very nervous," he reported with amusement. "Apparently, they've been calling the police all night, reporting you missing." Missing, of course. The confused old woman had wandered off. They were building their case. The irony was perfect. While they were reporting my disappearance as a victim, I was orchestrating my return as an avenger. "Are you ready?" Mr. Harrison asked. I looked at Richard's letters. I looked at Maria, laying out my best black suit. I looked out at the sea that had witnessed my first dreams. I had spent 72 years learning who I truly was. It was time to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. I'm ready to reclaim what's mine. The drive back to my home felt like a triumphal procession. The taxi stopped a block from my house. I could see the cars parked out front. Robert's gray BMW, David's white Mercedes, and my brother Thomas's red truck. The vultures had gathered. Mr. Harrison was already waiting in his car. "Everything's ready," he said, showing me a digital recorder. "I have the confessions we recorded last year and the certified copies of all the real documents." I walked toward my house, my steps echoing like hammer blows on the pavement. The invaders had taken my castle, believing the queen had fled forever. A fatal mistake. I rang the doorbell of my own house. Christine opened it. Her face went through a fascinating sequence of emotions: surprise, fear, rapid calculation, and finally, that fake, wide-eyed smile. "Eleanor!" "My God, we were so worried," she exclaimed, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Where have you been?" "I was thinking," I replied simply, walking past her into my own home. Robert, David, and Thomas came rushing from the living room, their faces a mixture of relief and panic. "Mom, you had us worried sick," Robert said, trying to hug me. I stepped back gently but firmly. "Worried about me or worried about your plans?" The silence was so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. Just then, Mr. Harrison knocked on the door. A small man with a mustache, whom I assumed was their lawyer, Mr. Davis, stood up nervously. "Who is it?" he asked. "My legal representative," I announced, my voice cutting the air like glass. "George Harrison, specialist in elder fraud and asset protection." The color drained from my children's faces. Mr. Harrison entered with Maria at his side, carrying a briefcase that I knew contained the complete destruction of their plans. "Mrs. Vance," Mr. Harrison said formally, "I understand there are some documents that require your signature." "That's right," I confirmed, watching my children squirm. "Perfect. But before we proceed, I need to verify that you are mentally competent to make this decision." "Of course she's competent," Christine interjected, far too quickly. "It's just that sometimes she gets a little confused." "Interesting," Mr. Harrison smiled like a shark smelling blood. "Because I have here a medical report from 2 days ago from Dr. Sanchez, confirming that Mrs. Vance is in excellent mental health." I pulled the report from my purse. "I also have here," he continued, "some very interesting recordings." The color vanished completely from my children's faces. Mr. Harrison pressed play. Robert's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. "Let's just hope she dies soon. I'm tired of pretending I care." Then David's. "All we need is to find a way to declare her incompetent." And finally, Christine's. "She's just a stubborn old woman. If she doesn't cooperate, we'll put her in the cheapest home we can find." The silence that followed was sepulchral. "Those recordings are taken out of context," Robert stammered. "Out of context?" Mr. Harrison laughed. I have 3 hours of similar recordings, all made with your mother's consent. Maria walked to the table and gathered their fraudulent documents. These are forgeries, she announced, and several of the assets mentioned here don't even exist in the official records. That's impossible, protested Mr. Davis, already packing his briefcase to flee. It's very possible, I said, my voice filled with an authority that had been dormant for too long, when the mother is much smarter than you ever imagined. Mr. Harrison then took out a laptop. Now, I said, sitting at the head of my own table, it's time to talk about the consequences of betraying the woman who gave you life. Sit down, all of you, I ordered, and they obeyed like chastened children. It's time for you to hear some truths. First, let's talk about real numbers. You believe my estate is worth approximately $1.5 million. They exchanged nervous glances. You're off by more than $3 million. The silence was absolute. Even Maria looked at me with surprise. My real net worth, I continued, savoring every second of their shock, including the properties you don't know about, the international investments, and the businesses I've been managing discreetly for decades, exceeds $5 million. Christine turned as white as a sheet. Robert gripped the arms of his chair as if the world were shaking. $5.2 million, to be exact, I clarified. Money you thought you could steal while I was playing with knitting needles. Mr. Harrison projected a presentation onto the wall, a detailed summary of all my assets. The numbers appeared, one after another, each figure a financial slap in the face. Condos in Miami, a small hotel in Key West, shares in tech companies, accounts in Switzerland. How? Robert whispered. How did a confused old woman manage this without you noticing? Very simple. You completely underestimated your mother. Maria placed another folder on the table. There are also the businesses Mrs. Vance has been running. A real estate consultancy, 2 investment firms, and the project that matters most to her. What project? Christine asked, her voice strangled. This was my favorite part. The Hope Center, I announced. A residential and service complex for older women who have been abandoned by their families. Women whose children see them as burdens instead of human beings. Mr. Harrison changed the slide. A spectacular architectural rendering of the Hope Center appeared. The land is purchased. Construction begins next month. And you, my dear children, have just become the primary inspiration for this project. I don't understand, David murmured. Every time you treated me like a useless old woman, every time you talked about me as if I were a piece of furniture, I added another service to the Hope Center. Thanks to you, it will be the best center of its kind in the entire country. My brother Thomas finally spoke. Eleanor, I didn't know about any of this. I know, Thomas. That's why you're not in legal trouble. But they, I pointed to my 3 black-hearted children, are going to face the full consequences. Mr. Harrison took the floor. Attempting to defraud a senior citizen is a federal crime. Forging documents is another. Conspiring to have someone declared incompetent is yet another. We're talking about multiple charges that could result in several years in prison. You can't do this to us, Robert exploded. We're your family. Exactly, I replied, my voice icy. And that makes your betrayal infinitely more painful and more unforgivable. I walked up to each of them, listing every sacrifice I had made for them, every dollar I had given them, every moment of love they had repaid with treachery. Tears streamed down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of pure, liberating rage. I let you make me feel useless. I faked confusion. I acted like the vulnerable old woman you needed me to be. But it was all an act. It was all a test you failed spectacularly. Maria placed the final document on the table, my real will. This was drafted 3 years ago and updated 6 months ago. In this will, Robert inherits $5,000. David inherits $5,000. Christine inherits nothing. The rest of my estate, $4,990,000, will be divided between the Hope Center, 3 charities, and Maria, who has shown more loyalty than you have in a lifetime. $5,000? David shouted. Christine began to sob, but her tears no longer moved me. But there is a way, I said, watching them cling to this last shred of hope. A way to what? Robert asked desperately. You work to deserve it. The Hope Center needs staff. If you can prove, over the next 5 years, that you truly care about something more than money, if you can prove that you understand the damage you caused, then we can talk about an inheritance. 5 years, David muttered. 5 years working without pay, I clarified. 5 years proving you deserve to be called my children, and if you refuse, then you face the criminal charges, Mr. Harrison said, and lose any possibility of an inheritance forever. It was a perfect ultimatum. Justice, with a chance for redemption. The choice is yours, I concluded. You can leave right now and never see me again, or you can stay and begin the long road to regaining my respect and your own dignity. Your next words will determine whether I still have children or just strangers who share my blood.